Hey guys, tonight we are wandering into a question that has tugged at imaginations for centuries. What if the Earth had not one moon, but two? Above your head, instead of a single glowing companion, there would be a duet. Two pale orbs moving in rhythm or in rivalry, tugging at the tides, at the land, even at your dreams. You probably wouldn't survive this version of Earth, by the way. Having two moons would be as beautiful as it would be dangerous. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back and picture the night sky, unfamiliar and doubled. One moon you recognize, the one you've always known, pale, cratered, serene. But beside it hangs another, maybe smaller, maybe closer, maybe gleaming in a slightly different shade. Two faces gazing down at Earth, pulling together and pulling apart. How would this change the story of the planet? How would it change the rhythm of life itself? Scientists know that our single moon is already extraordinary. It stabilizes Earth's tilt, keeping seasons steady. It shapes the tides, pulling at the oceans twice a day. Without it, Earth might wobble chaotically, climates swinging wildly over millennia. But with two moons, the balance becomes complicated. Their combined gravity would tug at the Earth unevenly, stretching and straining not just the oceans but the crust itself. Some researchers suggest there might be endless earthquakes, tidal waves taller than mountains, and a landscape forever reshaped. Others wonder if such a system could stabilize itself, like a cosmic dance where two partners find a delicate rhythm. Picture the oceans first. Right now, tides are simple: high, low, repeat. With two moons, tides would overlap, interfere, amplify. Imagine walking along a beach and seeing waves race higher than you've ever known. On some nights, when both moons aligned, the tides might flood entire coastlines. On other nights, when their pulls opposed each other, the seas might fall eerily still. Would human civilizations have ever built their cities by the sea under such conditions? Or would we have stayed inland, avoiding shores that change shape daily? And think of the skies. Lunar eclipses would be more common, more dramatic, sometimes with one moon shadowing the other. The night would rarely be dark. Farmers might have worked longer under the light of twin moons. Poets might have written of doubled romance or doubled madness. Folklore would be filled with tales of two guardians or two rivals shaping fate together. Would ancient people have worshipped both, or chosen one as the true light? As you drift deeper into this thought, you feel the pull of their gravity not only on the seas, but on yourself. Every breath, every heartbeat, tuned to a planet reshaped by two silent watchers. What would the Earth look like beneath such power? The answer lies ahead. Imagine the continents under the strain of two moons. With their gravity constantly shifting, the Earth's crust would flex and groan. Volcanoes might erupt more often, earthquakes shaking not once in centuries, but many times within a human life. The land itself would feel restless. Civilizations, if they had ever arisen, would have been forced to build differently. No towering stone temples on unstable ground. Perhaps humanity would have favoured nomadic lives, moving lightly across lands that cracked and shifted too often to trust. And what of the creatures before us? Dinosaurs, mammals, even the earliest fish, would they have endured under the stress of oceans slamming coastlines daily, of climates thrown into disarray? Some scientists speculate that complex life might have been delayed or even prevented entirely. Yet others imagine that life would simply have adapted differently, evolving stronger shells, more flexible bodies, instincts tuned to constant upheaval. Lift your gaze now to the night sky again. Two moons tracing their paths, sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes even colliding in your imagination. Astronomers call such a system unstable. The second moon, depending on its size and distance, might not last forever. Over millions of years, gravity could drag it closer until it shattered into a ring, a glittering band across the night. Imagine stepping outside your home and seeing not only two moons, but a ring system arching across the horizon, Saturn's glory brought down to Earth. How would human culture have told that story? Would the myths of gods and guardians have been written in silver arcs across the heavens? Here is a quirky thought. Wolves, whose howls already seem tied to the single moon, would they howl twice as long? Would poets speak of double lunacy, the madness of being pulled by two celestial bodies at once? Even sleep might be altered. Nights never fully dark, your dreams forever lit by twin lights that refuse to let shadows settle. And in that half-dark, would you feel comforted or haunted? Scientists still debate whether two moons could remain stable for long without one eventually breaking free. If it drifted away, our sky would suddenly lose its twin, leaving only one, just as we see it now. Is it possible that Earth once had another moon, long ago, and lost it? Some theories hint at it. Perhaps our lonely companion is itself the survivor of an ancient collision, fragments merged into one. As you imagine this, you realize how much our single moon has defined us. Our calendars follow its phases. Our myths circle around its glow. Our tides nourish ecosystems, shape coastlines, and inspire the rhythm of life. With two moons, history, culture, even biology might have spun in completely different directions. Now picture yourself lying by the sea. Waves crash higher than houses when both moons align. On other nights, the water pulls away so far you can walk across sand that normally lies hidden beneath the surf. Whole cities might have to predict these twin tidal dances to survive. Farmers might follow lunar calendars with two overlapping cycles, always watching which moon would rule the night. It would be a life lived in rhythm, not with one steady drumbeat, but with two competing melodies. And so, as you close this first section of thought, you feel yourself hovering between awe and unease. Two moons would bring beauty, yes, but also chaos. They would change tides, change climates, change destinies. Perhaps we should be grateful for the one moon we have. A single, steady companion, quiet in the sky, pulling at us gently, reminding us of balance. And yet, you cannot help but wonder, what would it feel like, just once, to look up and see two? You step now into the tides themselves. Imagine standing at the edge of a world with not one lunar pull but two. The surface of the sea before you rises and falls in strange overlapping rhythms, each wave tugged by a different hand in the sky. One moon drags the water east, the other drags it west, and in the middle the sea does not quite know which way to go. Sometimes their pull works together, and the tide rushes in so high that whole coastlines are swallowed in hours. At other times their forces clash, leaving the shore strangely still, water lying flat and glassy for days before stirring again. Close your eyes and picture the sand beneath your feet, damp and cool, but rising water reaches it again sooner than expected. The tide returns before you've had time to build your driftwood fire or gather shells. In this world, twice a month when the two moons align, the ocean does not merely rise, it roars upward. Beaches vanish, cliffs are battered. Villages along the shore might find themselves abandoned because the water simply refuses to stay in one place. And then, when the orbits drift apart, the opposite occurs. Tides flatten into long, eerie calms, the sea refusing to move, as if exhausted from all its heaving. Now imagine what that means for life itself. Reefs, if they could survive at all, would be built like fortresses. Corals in our world are delicate, branching like lace, but here they might be squat, sturdy, almost like stone towers, bracing themselves against constant surges. Fish would time their spawning not with gentle lunar cycles, but with rare, fleeting moments of balance, when both moons aligned just enough to steady the sea. Think of early life crawling out of those waters. Would tiny amphibians have even dared to attempt the land if the shores kept shifting, sometimes underwater, sometimes dry and cracked? Perhaps evolution itself would have hesitated, or been forced into stranger paths we can hardly imagine. Civilizations too would be shaped by this lunar duet. Harbours that in our world became the beating hearts of trade might never have existed here. How do you build a port if the tide drowns it one week and abandons it to mud the next? Entire cultures might avoid coasts altogether, settling inland where rivers, though still restless, were at least predictable. Trade across oceans might have taken centuries longer to emerge, and with it, history itself might have slowed. And then there are the smaller stories, the quirky details that make life what it is. Sea turtles in our world return to the same beaches year after year, guided by the glow of a single moon. But with two moons, picture hatchlings scrambling from the sand, two pale beacons in the sky pulling them in opposite directions. Half scurry toward one light, half toward the other, scattering across the shore, vulnerable, confused. Would they adapt, develop new instincts, or simply dwindle until only a few stubborn survivors remained? The poetry of tides, the gentle breathing of Earth's oceans that we take for granted, would be lost. Instead, there would be chaos, surges and lulls, a restless water world that never quite settled. Shorelines would not be carved slowly over ages but redrawn in decades, erasing maps almost as quickly as they were made. A bay here today might be gone in your children's lifetime, replaced by jagged inlets or swallowed entirely by the sea. Picture farmers trying to live in such a place. Their fields near the coast would be a gamble every year. Too close, and a double surge of tide might drown their crops in salty water. Too far, and the ground might crack in long stretches of dryness when both moons held the sea at bay. Agriculture itself might have grown up differently, centered not on fertile deltas near oceans, but on high plains and valleys safely distant from unpredictable tides. And think of the myths that would bloom under two moons. Imagine storytellers gazing up at the night sky, weaving tales of two siblings, one gentle and one fierce, forever tugging at the seas in a quarrel that never ends. Lovers might whisper vows beneath the softer moon, while warriors might raise swords to the harsher one. Every ritual, every song, every calendar would have been bound not to a single cycle, but to a weaving of two rhythms that rarely matched. Science, too, would have followed another path. Early astronomers would not have charted the neat ebb and flow of one tide, but the chaotic pattern of two. Predicting the sea would have been the greatest puzzle, forcing mathematics to grow sharper, earlier, just to keep ships safe. And ships themselves, perhaps smaller, lighter, made to be dragged inland when waters surged too far. The great age of exploration might never have come at all, or might have taken place with entirely different vessels, entire civilizations shaped by the sea's unpredictability. Now pause and consider the animals again. In our world, crabs scuttle on shorelines, retreating with each retreating wave, advancing again as the tide rolls in. Under two moons, their dances would be stranger, perhaps with longer pauses, bursts of frantic motion, whole generations tuned to a rhythm no human ear could follow. And whales, those gentle giants, sing across oceans. Their songs follow the pull of one tide, echoing across seas that breathe like lungs. But with two moons, the oceans would have more than one breath. Would whales sing in counterpoint, harmonizing to two rhythms at once, weaving the sky's dual pull into music the human ear could never fully understand? There's a quieter thought too. Tides shape coastlines, but they also shape life's origin. Some scientists believe that the constant ebb and flow of a single moon's tide created the shallow pools where early chemistry sparked into biology. If the tides had been violent and erratic instead, would life ever have found such a cradle? Or would the story of Earth have ended before it began? It is humbling to think that everything you know, forests, mountains, families, even your own heartbeat, might owe its existence to the calm rhythm of one moon alone. Add a second, and the story unravels into something strange and alien. Not impossible, perhaps, but different in ways we cannot fully imagine. So as you drift with this vision, picture yourself standing at that restless shore. Above you, two moons rise, one silver, one pale gold. Their light overlaps, shadows doubling and crossing. The waves rush in, pull back, then pause, the sea confused by the sky's conflicting orders. You breathe with it, surge, retreat, silence, your own rhythm caught in theirs. The moons above you linger, and now we turn to their deeper pull, the way two bodies orbiting Earth would not simply share the sky, but reshape the very bones of the planet. Imagine the gravitational tug-of-war, two invisible hands stretching Earth from opposite sides. The crust would groan, volcanoes might flare more often, earthquakes could rumble in new patterns. Our planet is not a silent rock, but a living, shifting sphere, and with two moons constantly pulling, its balance would be strained. Think of the tides of stone, not just water. Even now, with one moon, the solid Earth itself rises and falls by a few centimeters every day, flexing under gravity. With 2 moons, those tides of stone could be larger, stressing mountains and valleys. Imagine living in a world where the ground itself subtly shifted beneath your feet. An unending breath of rock. You might not notice it directly, but volcanoes and rifts would bear the scars. Volcanoes are already Earth's storytellers, carrying the tale of the deep mantle to the surface. With 2 moons tugging, their voices might grow louder, erupting more often, pouring lava across landscapes with greater frequency. Civilizations rising in such a world would learn to respect fire as much as water. Towns would be built farther from volcanic slopes, or perhaps entire cultures would live in nomadic patterns, fleeing eruptions that arrived like seasons. And earthquakes, those sudden jolts when the planet sighs, might be more common. Not necessarily stronger every time, but frequent, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Picture yourself lying in bed at night, feeling the faint tremor of the ground as one moon sets and the other rises, each pulling in different directions. For people of such a world, stability would be an illusion. The Earth would always feel alive, restless, shifting. Now think of climate. Moons do not only pull on tides, they also tilt the rhythm of the planet itself. Our single moon helps steady Earth's axial tilt, keeping our seasons relatively stable. Without it, the planet would wobble chaotically, ice ages and heat waves rolling in at random. With 2 moons, the question grows more complicated. Would they work together, anchoring Earth's axis more tightly, or would their competing pulls make the wobble worse? Scientists still debate such possibilities, running models that hum with uncertainty. If the axis wobbled more, climates would swing like a pendulum. Civilizations would need to adapt to summers that could last centuries, winters that could bury continents in ice for millennia. Imagine knowing that your grandchildren's grandchildren might inherit a world of frozen oceans or deserts hotter than any alive today. How would humans plan? Would knowledge itself become the greatest survival tool, passed down to prepare for shifts no one alive would ever see? In this world, migration would not just be a choice but a constant rhythm of life. Populations flowing north and south, east and west, chasing habitable zones as climates swung. Cultures might define themselves not by place, but by movement, their stories tied to journeys rather than settlements. The idea of home would be less a location and more a path. Picture how myths would grow in such a restless world. Every tremor, every eruption, every shifting tide of climate would seem like the will of the moons. Stories would bloom of gods wrestling in the heavens, their struggle mirrored in quakes and fire below. Perhaps one moon would be seen as the bringer of storms, the other as the keeper of calm. Humanity has always looked upward for meaning, and with 2 glowing guides, the sky would feel like a stage where cosmic drama never ended. Even art might change. Imagine caves painted not with 1 glowing circle but 2 side by side, their phases mapped by ancient hands. Calendars would grow more complex, rhythms of planting and harvest timed not by 1 lunar cycle, but by a duet of phases. Poetry would sing of twin moons crossing paths, of lovers meeting under a doubled glow, of destiny written not in 1 symbol, but in 2. But there would also be fear. 2 moons cannot dance forever without tension. Astronomers today would warn that one might tug the other into a new orbit, or even send it crashing to Earth after millions of years. Imagine lying awake at night, wondering if the smaller moon would one day blaze across the sky as a falling star too large to ignore. For ancient peoples, that fear might be translated into rituals, offerings, prayers, anything to keep the balance in the heavens from breaking. And then there is the question of how 2 moons would shape life itself. The tides, the quakes, the climates, they all push and pull at evolution. Perhaps creatures of this world would be more adaptable, hardened to change, more resilient to extremes. Maybe amphibians crawling onto land would face harsher droughts, stronger floods, and so evolve quicker into creatures of both worlds. Or perhaps the constant instability would slow evolution, making survival itself so fragile that fewer paths were ever explored. Which is more likely? Even now, scientists argue. In your mind, stand now at the edge of an ancient shore in this twin-mooned Earth. The sand is damp beneath your feet, the tide rushing higher and then receding faster than you expect. Above you, 2 moons rise together, one pale and full, the other glowing smaller, sharper, The world around you hums with possibility, with danger, with the tension of balance. You know this balance cannot last forever, and yet in its fragile beauty, you see the same truth that runs through all of Earth's story. That life endures not because the world is stable, but because it adapts, always, to whatever the sky and sea decide to give. And so, in this section of our journey, the lesson of two moons is not only about tides and tremors, it is about resilience, about the ability to walk forward in a world that never stops shifting, about finding beauty in the uncertainty. Imagine yourself standing at the shoreline of this world again, but not in the distant past. Picture instead the early stirrings of civilization, when small groups of humans begin to watch the sky carefully. They count the days, track the patterns, and notice that not one moon but two are guiding them. The first moon, larger and brighter, offers the rhythm they depend on. The second, smaller but persistent, adds another layer of complexity. Together, they create a calendar that is unlike anything we have known in our real history. Every ritual, every planting season, every journey would depend on understanding the duet in the sky. Priests and astronomers might dedicate lifetimes to predicting eclipses, moments when one moon crosses the other, casting shadows across the earth. To the ordinary farmer or traveller, these moments would feel sacred, even dangerous. Would crops grow better after an eclipse? Would storms follow? Myths would rise quickly, for people always fill the unknown with stories. And think of navigation. In our world, sailors look to the single moon, the stars, the steady patterns above. But with two moons, the night sky is brighter, more confusing, perhaps more helpful in some ways, more dangerous in others. A sailor may find guidance when both moons are visible, their glow lighting the seas so strongly that no torch or lantern is needed. But on other nights, when one hides behind the earth or behind its companion, shadows deepen, tides roar, and travel becomes perilous. The ocean is no longer a passive road. It is a living force responding to the tug-of-war above. Let your imagination wander to cities built under these skies. Temples carved with twin circles, aligned so that on certain nights both moons rise perfectly in the doorway. Festivals timed not to harvest alone, but to the rare events when the moons line up in the heavens, casting strange twin shadows on the ground. Imagine people gathering in the thousands, hushed as the sky grows dark, convinced they are watching gods argue. Science might later explain the orbits, but the awe, the reverence would never fully fade. The presence of two moons would not just shape religion and culture, but the rhythm of daily life. Nights would rarely be dark. The glow of two moons would bathe landscapes in pale silver light, stretching shadows across the ground. Predators that hunt in darkness would lose some advantage, forcing them to evolve sharper skills, swifter movements. Humans too would adjust. Perhaps evenings would become longer, more active, villages alive deep into the night because true darkness is so rare. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what would it feel like to grow up in a world where the night never fully hides you? Where shadows are always cast and silence is never quite as deep? Would humans feel safer, comforted by the constant glow? Or would they feel exposed, watched over by not one celestial eye, but two? Think of how two moons might affect art and storytelling. Painters would always have two glowing orbs in their skies. Poets would speak of double gazes, of twin guardians in the heavens. Lovers would sit together under not just one moon, but two, their promises bound to dual reflections on the water. Folklore would flourish with tales of sibling moons, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in rivalry. One could symbolize protection, the other danger. One could stand for fertility, the other for death. Cultures would build their identities around these symbols, forever split between the double faces above. Now imagine the psychological effect. Our own moon already stirs emotions, romance, mystery, fear. But two moons would amplify this pull. People might feel more restless during their cycles. Animals might grow agitated, tides in both water and mind rising higher. Scientists today study how moonlight influences sleep, mood, even fertility. In a two-moon world, these rhythms would be layered, complicated, unpredictable. Nights of double full moons might be times of frenzy, festivals, riots, or sacred rituals. Nights of double absence might plunge the world into unease, the rare darkness unsettling in its rarity. And the natural sciences. Consider astronomy in such a world. Our ancestors mapped the stars using the single moon as reference. With two, mathematics would grow more complex but also more advanced sooner. Civilizations might leap into understanding orbits earlier, driven by the need to explain the strange dance of two moons circling in the sky. Astrology, too, would multiply in complexity. Horoscopes might not only track planets and stars but also the combined positions of the moons, with every pairing believed to shape destiny differently. Picture a night of travel across ancient deserts. Caravans move under a sky where two moons light their path. The dunes glow silver, and shadows stretch twice across the sand. The travellers whisper stories of how one moon was born of fire, the other of ice, both bound forever to circle the earth. They do not know the science, but they feel the awe. For awe has always been the most faithful companion of humanity when looking upward. As time goes on, these moons would continue to shape imagination. Literature, religion, philosophy, even science, all tethered to the sky above. When people debate the nature of the soul, they might point to the duality of the moons. When they seek balance, they may look for nights when both moons share the same horizon, a fleeting harmony to mirror their own. And always, tides and calendars, myths and music, lives and deaths would move to the rhythm of two steady companions. Pause with this image. A quiet village. Children looking upward, tracing shapes in the sky. Two moons watching over them, patient, ancient, mysterious. The world is never dark. The world is never the same as ours. You find yourself gazing at the night sky. Above you, the familiar silver glow of the moon shines steady, casting a path of pale light across the ground. But tonight in this story, imagine something different. Imagine that beside that familiar face hangs another, a second moon, orbiting our world in tandem. Two lunar companions instead of one. The thought alone is enough to send a ripple through your imagination. What would Earth look like beneath two moons? How would oceans move? How would tides rise? How would life adapt? The first thing to consider is gravity. One moon already pulls on Earth's oceans, sculpting the tides we know so well. A second moon, depending on its size and orbit, would add its own tug, creating a dance of waters far more complex. Instead of two high tides each day, there might be 3 or 4 or unpredictable surges as the gravitational pulls lined up or opposed each other. Imagine standing on a beach and watching waves race in with strange rhythms, sometimes gentle, sometimes sudden, as though the sea itself had moods tied to two separate masters. Would coastal life adapt to this chaos? Scientists still debate whether complex ecosystems could thrive under such irregular tides, or whether life might have taken a very different path. Now tilt your eyes upward again. Picture two moons rising together over the horizon, one pale and familiar, the other perhaps smaller, tinted a faint copper from ancient dust. On some nights they would shine side by side, twin lanterns in the sky. On others they would pull apart, one climbing high, the other drifting lower. Their orbits would be a celestial duet, sometimes harmonious, sometimes discordant. Ancient humans looking upward would have woven myths not of one lunar goddess, but of siblings, two companions forever circling above. Would we have told stories of rivalry, of balance, of guardians? Perhaps whole calendars would be written differently, with months measured by the interplay of two glowing bodies instead of one. The presence of two moons would alter not only the seas and the sky, but also the very spin of Earth. The gravitational tug of a single moon already slows our rotation bit by bit, lengthening days over eons. With two, this process would be stronger, pulling on our planet like reins on a restless horse. Days might have grown longer far sooner, perhaps stretching into 30 or 40 hours long in ancient ages. Can you picture living under a sky where the sun lingers twice as long, where nights drift endlessly, and where both moons shine for hours without setting? Would sleep itself feel different? Would humans, if they ever evolved, live slower lives, adapted to a different rhythm of light and dark? In this imagined world, eclipses too would be far stranger. With two moons, the chances of alignments multiply. Some nights you might see one moon drift across the face of the other, a glowing overlap of worlds. At other times, both moons might line up with the sun, casting layered shadows onto Earth. The skies would become a theatre of shadows and lights, a show more spectacular than anything we know now. Ancient astronomers, had they existed, would have puzzled over these patterns for centuries, trying to untangle the riddles of a sky with two companions. And yet not all consequences would be so beautiful. With two moons tugging on the Earth, tectonic stresses might be greater. The crust, already restless, could crack more often. Earthquakes might be more frequent, volcanic eruptions more violent. Life would not simply enjoy a double moonlit sky. It would endure a more tumultuous world beneath its feet. Think now of the creatures of the sea. Already in our real world, many animals rely on the tides to survive. Sea turtles nest when tides are high. Crabs scuttle along shores in rhythm with the moon. Fish migrate, plankton bloom, coral spawn, all guided by the lunar cycle. But under two moons, those rhythms would twist into something unfamiliar. Imagine coral reefs releasing clouds of eggs not once a month, but twice, or unpredictably, as moons crossed paths and tides surged unevenly. Would such a system collapse, or would it create a new kind of richness? Scientists still wonder whether such complexity would help life diversify more quickly, or push it into fragile chaos. On land, nocturnal animals would live under skies brighter than ours. The silver light of one moon already illuminates the ground, enough for predators to stalk and prey to flee. With two moons, some nights would be twice as bright, almost like daylight spilling into the hours of rest. Would owls still glide silently in the shadows, or would they hunt under skies too exposed? Would human ancestors looking up at a night sky never fully dark learn to fear less or more? Perhaps we would have never learned to sleep under true darkness, our nights softened always by lunar glow. But light has another power, inspiration. Two moons would surely shape culture, myth, and imagination. Poets might speak of twin spirits watching from above. Farmers might track the planting season not by a single cycle, but by the harmony or discord between two. Lovers might walk under skies where two moons shone together, and the phrase, "once in a blue moon," would mean something far stranger than it does now. The very stories of humanity would be written differently, woven with duality, balance, and tension reflected in the heavens. Now imagine storms. The combined pull of two moons would stir not only tides but also winds and currents. Hurricanes might form more often, fueled by the turbulent seas. Coastlines would be reshaped again and again, settlements forced further inland. Civilizations might grow more cautious, their cities built on high cliffs, their ships more resilient. Would navigation under two moons be easier, guided by twin beacons, or harder, confused by overlapping cycles? Mariners of such a world would have become poets of the tides, their maps etched with shifting patterns of water, their songs filled with warnings of double moons. And what of us now in this quiet imagining? You lie beneath your ceiling, safe, listening, yet your mind drifts into a world that never was. You picture nights of twin lights, seas surging with complex rhythms, forests alive under brighter skies. And you realize something gentle. Even though our world has only one moon, its influence has already been enough to shape tides, sleep, myth, and memory. A second would have changed everything, but one alone has written half the poetry of the human heart. So tonight, as you imagine those twin moons hovering in silence, let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften. And let the thought settle. Earth is already extraordinary. Even one moon has given us rhythms, wonder, and the steady glow that reminds us we are never entirely in darkness. Two would have been wilder, yes, but one is already enough to dream beneath. Picture the Earth now, not as you know it, but as a restless ocean world shaped by the rhythm of two moons. Their combined pull does not simply lift and lower the waters. It twists them, braids them, reshapes them. Tides no longer follow the simple cycle of rise and fall we are familiar with. Instead, coastlines breathe in strange and unpredictable rhythms. Some days the waters rise so high they swallow cliffs. Other days they retreat so far they expose seabeds usually hidden, their sand and rock shining under the sun. In such a world, life clings to edges differently. Tide pools would not just appear for hours at a time, but for entire stretches of days, filling with strange creatures that learn to endure heat, dryness, and then sudden floods. Perhaps whole new forms of animals evolve, designed to live in the rhythm of shifting moons, creatures that scuttle quickly when water vanishes, then stretch out gills when it returns. The simple act of breathing would be a delicate balance, survival rehearsed and repeated over millions of years. Now imagine the land, the continents stretching across this watery globe. Floodplains would be far more volatile. Farmers, if humanity still rose in such a place, would need to learn to read the sky not for weather alone, but for the dance of moons. Planting seeds would depend not just on seasons, but on the harmony of orbits. A misplaced planting could mean crops drowned under tides or starved in parched soil. Civilization itself would become a story of watching the heavens with precision. The first scientists of such a world might not study stars, but instead the delicate choreography of their two moons, sketching maps of lunar crossings as if lives depended on it, because they truly would. But what of storms? Already, with one moon, tides help stir the oceans. Add another, and the surface of the seas grows ever more restless. Waves might roll higher, driven by double pulls. Currents would clash more often, creating eddies and whirlpools strong enough to shape coastlines. Hurricanes, already terrifying in our own world, could intensify with seas heated by friction and churned by lunar command. In this vision, you might picture coastal cities built on tall cliffs, whole cultures rising far from shore, their harbours carved deep into rock to protect from the unpredictable seas. Would humans of this world even dare to love the ocean? Or would they live with a cautious distance, treating the waves with reverence and fear? And as you imagine this, remember how fragile balance is. Even on our single moon Earth, the ocean regulates our climate, carrying warmth from the equator to the poles. Two moons might quicken those currents, changing the flow of heat around the planet. Some lands might freeze more often, others scorch. Civilizations would rise and fall under these shifting patterns, not only because of war or famine, but because the very heartbeat of the planet pulsed with two lunar voices instead of one. Look up at the sky of this imagined world. The two moons are not always steady companions. Sometimes they draw close together, their light overlapping in a bright doubled glow. Other times they drift apart, one trailing low on the horizon while the other rides high. Nights are never the same. Farmers, sailors, and storytellers would watch their wandering and build calendars far more complex than ours. But beauty hides challenges. When both moons align, tides might surge into superfloods, drowning whole coastlines. When they oppose each other, tides might flatten, leaving harbours stranded and ships grounded. To live here is to live with constant adjustment. Cultures might invent rituals around lunar patterns, festivals during calm tides, solemn watchfulness during dangerous alignments. Imagine a world where whole economies depend not just on trade winds or seasons, but on which moon is rising and which is setting. There's also the question of stability. Scientists wonder whether two moons could even share an orbit long-term without tugging themselves into chaos. Would they remain graceful dancers or eventually collide? If such a collision came, the debris might rain down in a fiery storm, reshaping life yet again. Or perhaps one moon would drift further away while the other clung close, changing the balance slowly, inexorably, until climates shifted and oceans relearned their pulse. It is a reminder that nothing in the cosmos is eternal. Even moons carry fragility. And yet, in this thought experiment, you might also imagine what wonders such a sky could inspire. Lovers walking under not one moonlit glow but two, poets comparing the double shadows of trees to hidden hearts, sailors marking their journeys by twin arcs of silver light. Night would never feel lonely. Dreams would always hold two watchful companions. The very psychology of humankind might be altered, shaped by a sky that never offered singularity, but always duality. You drift with this vision now. The seas churn, the tides climb and fall in strange rhythms, and the people of Earth live by the moons, charting their lives to patterns written not by one, but by two celestial partners. And you, lying here, can feel the pull as if those twin tides move through your breath. Inhale, exhale, two rhythms in one body. The story of two moons is not just about science, but about perspective. It asks, how different would we be if the very sky above us had taught us to live by more than one light? The pull of two moons does more than sculpt tides. It reshapes the very heartbeat of the Earth itself. Imagine tectonic plates responding to the constant tug, their movements amplified by forces above. Volcanoes might erupt more frequently, their pressure cycles hastened by lunar rhythms. Earthquakes could arrive with eerie regularity, tied not just to faults in stone, but to alignments in the sky. A planet with 2 moons would never truly sleep. Think of how life might adapt. In the seas, creatures could evolve to synchronize their spawning with dual tidal cycles, perhaps creating multiple breeding seasons each year. Some animals might thrive in the chaotic surges, their young carried further by stronger currents. Others might struggle, their eggs or larvae lost to unpredictable flows. On land, even migration patterns could shift. Birds might use the twin moons as navigational anchors, adjusting their routes to the shifting dance above. And what about us? Imagine living in a world where night is never quite the same twice. Sometimes both moons rise together, flooding the world with silver so bright that darkness barely exists. Other times, one lingers while the other sets, leaving you with an unbalanced, haunting half-light. Our ancestors would have shaped myths around these moments, calling them omens, blessings, or warnings. Entire calendars would be rewritten, not around the rhythm of a single moon, but around the conjunctions and oppositions of 2. There's a quirky thought here too. With 2 moons constantly tugging, would Earth's day length be the same? Some scientists suggest that tidal friction, intensified, could slow our rotation even faster than it has in reality. Imagine a day stretching longer and longer until what we call 24 hours might instead be 30, or more. How would humanity cope with a slower Earth? Would we embrace longer nights of rest or longer days of toil? Pause and picture yourself beneath this sky. 2 moons glowing in the dark, tides racing against coasts, volcanoes and quakes breathing more fiercely. And yet, through it all, life endures, bending to the new rules, reshaping itself in patient resilience. That is the true pattern of Earth. Chaos followed by adaptation, change followed by persistence. You carry the idea forward and let the sky keep teaching you. 2 moons don't just choreograph tides and tremors. They rewrite nights themselves. On evenings when both are high, you would cast 2 soft shadows slightly offset, like a faint echo on the ground following your heels. Photographers would plan twin loon nights, chasing silver on water and pale edges on cliff faces. Storytellers would swear the world feels brighter, not because the sun is stronger, but because the dark has learned to share its stage. Civilizations lean into what the sky gives them. With 2 moons, calendars bloom into layered cycles, a practical poetry of months beating at 2 tempos. Priests and farmers might track the slow interference pattern when the lunar months drift in and out of step, predicting bumper crops when spring tides align and cautioning restraint when neaps arrive in pairs. Sailors would learn the beat tide, the long waxing and waning of tidal amplitude created by 2 different lunar pools overlapping. That is a mainstream fact wrapped in a new setting. Tides from 2 distinct periods superimpose, creating constructive and destructive phases that organize life along the shore. You wonder how climate follows such a sky. Earth's single moon dampens wild swings in axial tilt, keeping seasons relatively stable over geologic spans. Add another lunar companion and scientists debate whether stability improves or resonances appear that nudge the tilt into slow, episodic wobbling. Would 2 moons cradle the axis more gently, or would they whisper competing rhythms that the planet cannot ignore? What do you think? Marine life keeps time with precision you feel more than see. Coral spawning today follows lunar cues so consistent that whole reefs release gametes like underwater weather. In a 2-moon world, reefs might split their spectacles, with one pulse under the brighter conjunctions and another reserved for the subtler, safer neaps. Remember those gentle nursery coves earlier? Now imagine them breathing to a longer beat, larvae surging out on spring king tides, then retreating during double neap lulls that calm the water to a glass. On beaches, you learn humility. Coasts would need deeper dunes, wider marshes, and flexible harbours that accept plus-minus ranges far beyond your single-moon norms. Cities might step back from the surf, trading postcard proximity for resilience, their seawalls curved and porous, built to spill rather than fight. Engineers would consult conjunction almanacs, scheduling bridge maintenance and tidal lag dredging around amplified surges. Quirky tidbit. Lighthouse keepers could hang 2 lunars on their weatherboards, carving little wooden discs they slide along rails to show travellers which moon rules tonight. Astronomy grows richer too. Eclipses become a living mosaic, sometimes one moon slipping across the sun while the other hangs to the side like a quiet witness. At rarer intervals the moons might occult each other from your viewpoint, a small disk sliding over a larger one, a celestial peekaboo felt in the hush of people looking up together. Lunar halos could overlap in thin cirrus, 2 rings crossing like a faint Venn diagram of ice and light. You can almost hear the gasp on a cold night when that happens. Geology refuses to sit out the dance. Tidal flexing already kneads Earth's crust and mantle by millimetres to centimetres. With 2 drivers, the stress cycles would layer, occasionally sinking to squeeze magma pathways open, and then relaxing them again like bellows. Volcanoes might favour certain alignments the way some flowers favour certain bees. It is not that moons cause eruptions on command, but they can time the release when a system is already near its threshold. Your sleep adapts, and your humour survives. People would blame bad hair days on double fulls, and late-night poets would swear the second moon is the one that convinces you to text your ex. Meanwhile, chronobiologists quietly publish papers on how 2 nocturnal light curves tweak melatonin, shifting bedtime by a handful of minutes on certain weeks. You smile, because even here the body listens to the sky. Culture finds its motifs. Festivals rise during rare twin zenith nights, when both moons sit high and the world becomes a softly lit amphitheatre. Architects etch crescent lattices into courtyards, aligning fountains with the 2 reflected paths so ripples weave a luminous plaid. Musicians write interference hymns, melodies that drift in and out of phase like the long tide, teaching ears to enjoy patience. And always the questions keep you company. If tidal friction grows stronger, how quickly would days lengthen over the ages, and what would that do to migration, agriculture, or the cadence of storms? If the moons enter a resonance, could their long-term tug alter ocean circulation, nudging heat differently between equator and pole? If one moon is smaller and edged into a higher orbit, would it drift away faster, leaving the other to inherit dominion, or would subtle exchanges of angular momentum braid their fates for eons? Which story would you place your bet on? For now, you return to the shore inside your mind. The surf inhales and exhales with a layered rhythm, like 2 drummers finding the same song from different corners of the stage. You feel the pull in your chest, a reminder that whether there is 1 moon or 2, you are still water, still clay, still tuned to gravity's lullaby. The planet keeps time, and you keep it with her. You drift onward, letting imagination carry you not just to the tides and the shadows, but to the deep clockwork of orbits. 2 moons around Earth do not simply share the sky. They weave a dance of gravity, each pulling on the planet, on each other, on the oceans, on the very rhythm of days. Picture the system from above, looking down on Earth like a glowing marble. 1 moon circles close, tracing a quick loop. The other glides farther out, slower, more stately. Their paths cross in complex alignments, sometimes pulling together, sometimes tugging against each other. This is the start of resonances. Think of them as repeating rhythms, orbital beats that echo across millennia. Astronomers studying such a system would fill notebooks with intricate cycles. They might discover that every few decades, the moons align in ways that exaggerate tides, storms, and even subtle shifts in Earth's spin. A mainstream fact here, our single moon already slows Earth's rotation by tiny fractions of a second each century. With 2 moons, that braking would be stronger, and the length of a day might stretch faster across geologic time. You might find yourself wondering, would a day in the far future be 25 hours, or 30? What would it feel like if the rhythm of sunrise and sunset slowly drifted away from what you know now? Geophysicists would point to Earth's core, noting how tidal stresses ripple not just across the crust, but through the mantle and down into molten iron. Extra stress could affect convection, perhaps stirring the geodynamo that gives you the magnetic field. Without that invisible shield, solar wind would strip the atmosphere, but with 2 moons enhancing internal churn, maybe the field stays strong. A quirky tidbit emerges. In such a world, Auroras might blaze more often, not less, as the magnetic field fluctuates under the combined beat of two lunar drummers. You imagine standing under those skies. Curtains of green and red shimmer overhead more nights than not, twisting into braids of colour that mirror the moons themselves. Children would grow up expecting the sky to sing in light, and travellers would navigate by both moonlight and auroral glow. The night would not be dark but alive, breathing, painted. Now think of animals attuned to these rhythms. Birds migrating across continents often use the moon and stars as guides. With two moons, their maps would be more complex, their instincts sharpened, perhaps even splitting species into groups attuned to different lunar cues. Marine creatures like turtles and crabs, which already synchronize with lunar cycles, might develop dual calendars, nesting on one moon's full phase, feeding on the other. The ocean would become not a single orchestra, but a duet, two overlapping symphonies of life responding to twin cues in the sky. You smile at the thought. Humans, ever curious, would join the song too. Farmers would plant by double moons, perhaps inventing new rituals when both shine full. Lovers would write poetry not about a single silver circle, but about which moon they met beneath. And astrologers, oh, they would have endless material, reading destinies in the complex dance of two glowing guides. Yet beneath this wonder lies the steady question. How stable would such a system really be? Would one moon eventually spiral inward, colliding with Earth, or would gravitational nudges push it outward into exile? Scientists still debate whether two large moons could coexist peacefully for billions of years, or whether chaos is inevitable. You drift deeper into the thought of orbital balance. Picture the closer moon tugging just a bit harder, pulling tides higher, dragging Earth's spins slower. The farther moon pulls more gently but steadily, like a distant partner in a dance. Together they create beats, rhythms, tidal surges that wax and wane in long cycles. Imagine being a scientist in that world, charting tides across centuries. You would discover not one repeating calendar but two, overlapping in ways both predictable and surprising. Storms might grow fierce when both moons aligned in perigee, their gravity joining hands to pull the seas high against the continents. Fishermen might whisper of twin-tide seasons, when oceans surge strangely and catches changed. On land, rivers would swell, estuaries breathe with more dramatic cycles. Wetlands might expand and retreat like lungs, shaping ecosystems around a rhythm of dual moons. Forests near coasts would adapt to stronger cycles of salt and fresh, and perhaps whole biomes would form that depend on this lunar duet. Now lift your eyes upward. Sometimes the two moons appear side by side, a pairing of glowing disks. Sometimes one chases the other across the sky, leaving a trail of light like footprints. And sometimes, rarely, they eclipse one another. A moon shadowing a moon, casting strange silvery halos across the earth below. Imagine the awe of ancient peoples watching this, fires burning low as they whispered stories of gods and siblings in the heavens. A quirky tidbit slips in. If one moon were slightly smaller, it might orbit closer, making eclipses of the sun even more frequent. Humanity would grow up with the expectation of double eclipses, layered shadows painting the earth in darkness more often. Rituals, myths, songs, they would all grow from this celestial drama. But scientists would ask, as they always do, whether such beauty carries risk. With two strong gravitational players, Earth's axial tilt might wobble more. Seasons could grow unstable, ice ages more frequent, climates swinging harder than they do in your world. Would civilizations rise and fall more quickly under such unstable skies? Or would adaptation make humanity hardier, more inventive, more attuned to change? And through it all, you wander quietly in thought, watching the moons pull on the oceans, on the forests, on the very heartbeat of Earth. You realize that two moons would not just light the night. They would shape the story of the planet itself. Now imagine yourself standing in the middle of an ancient plain, the air cool, the horizon wide. Overhead, two moons trace their paths across the sky. One hangs low, glowing warmly, while the other lingers higher, paler, distant yet steady. The light they cast is not just brightness, but layers. One shadow soft, the other sharp, two patterns overlapping to paint the night in shifting textures. Picture how early humans might have looked upward. their fires flickering as they tried to make sense of this dual spectacle. They would not have seen random stones circling Earth. They would have seen symbols, perhaps one moon as a mother, the other as a child, or one as a guardian of hunters, the other a spirit of crops. Entire mythologies might have grown around their relationship, conflict, love, rivalry, harmony. Think of Stonehenge, the Mayan temples, the ancient observatories built in your own world to honour one moon and one sun. Now double the complexity. Alignments would be trickier, rituals longer, festivals richer. Imagine 2 harvest moons rising together, blood red and golden, signalling abundance or warning. Farmers would read the skies not just for one cycle, but for the harmonies and dissonances of 2. A quirky tidbit arises. With 2 moons, eclipses would sometimes overlap. Priests might claim those moments as signs of endings and beginnings, recording them in carvings and chants. Stories of heroes might tie their fates to the crossing of moons, predicting that when one shadowed the other, destiny itself shifted. But scientists today might ask, how would culture change when the sky offered such constant drama? Would humans become more attuned to cycles, building calendars far earlier? Or would the complexity confuse, leading to myths more than measurements, superstition stronger than science? Now drift further into the thought of night journeys. Hunters moving under silver light would see no true darkness, for at least one moon would almost always be shining. Night predators would adapt, their stealth tested against brighter skies. Perhaps human eyes too would evolve differently, more sensitive to contrasts, sharper in dim light, accustomed to a world where shadows came in pairs. Pause for a moment. What would it feel like to live in such a world? To look up and always see companions in the sky? Would it feel comforting or crowded? Would humans imagine themselves less alone in the universe or more tightly watched? Now let yourself picture the rituals under this sky of twins. Villages might gather not only at full moons but at the rare nights when both moons waxed full together. Imagine the glow, 2 silver discs flooding the earth with near daylight, shadows doubled and overlapping, torches unnecessary. Songs would rise, drums echoing in rhythms tied to the double cycles, and myths would tell of times when the moons argued, one waning while the other waxed. This dual presence could shape language itself. In your world, words like lunacy stem from the pull of a single moon. But in a 2-moon Earth, there might be words for double madness, for twin inspirations, for harmony when both were bright and discord when one darkened the other. Even poetry would glow differently, its metaphors layered. Lovers would not simply promise each other under the moon, but under both lights, their union sealed by dual glimmers. A quirky tidbit. Farmers might have kept 2 separate calendars, one for each moon, weaving planting and harvest schedules through overlapping cycles. Festivals could fall when the cycles aligned, moments of rare abundance or sacred danger. This complexity might push civilizations toward astronomy earlier, just to make sense of the chaos above. Now drift forward in thought to questions scientists would still wonder about. Would religions fracture around which moon held more power? Would one be called the bringer of rain, the other the keeper of tides? Would nations claim one moon as their own, leading to wars of symbolism and sky? Or would humanity see them as eternal companions, symbols of balance, harmony, and duality? Even modern culture would be reshaped. Cities would shine at night without electricity, their streets washed in silver. Art would depict not a single glowing orb but 2, dancers and painters and filmmakers all reaching for ways to capture double beauty. And you, lying here, would never look up to an empty sky. At least one moon would always be watching. Take a breath now and feel the weight of that thought. The world you know is built on one lunar companion, yet with 2, every layer of myth, story and ritual might have doubled too. And perhaps, in that doubling, humanity's imagination would have stretched even further, crafting tales not only of Earth, but of all the skies beyond. Now imagine yourself stepping into the present day, in a world shaped by 2 moons. The myths and rituals of earlier ages would have left their echoes, but science would dominate the story now. Astronomers would track the twin orbits with precision, their charts mapping not just a single rhythm, but a dance of gravitational pulls. Calendars would have evolved differently, with entire cultures debating which lunar cycle to follow or how best to merge both into a coherent system. Picture two glowing crescents in the sky as astronauts first break free of Earth's atmosphere. Would the space race of the 20th century have aimed at one moon or the other? Perhaps nations would compete for flags planted on separate worlds, with pride bound not to one dusty surface but to whichever light they claimed. There might have been double Apollo missions, parallel sets of footprints, parallel stories of triumph and tragedy. Think of how physics itself would be reshaped. Two moons mean two sets of gravitational tug, complicating tides, shifting the crust, stretching and squeezing the planet with overlapping rhythms. Coastal cities would have had to learn the patterns of double tide, one rising after another, leaving ports vulnerable to more frequent floods. Civil engineering would carry a lunar dimension, bridges, harbours, even urban planning forced to account for the restless pull of twin skies. Here's a quirky tidbit to rest on. In this world of two moons, surfing might be the most unpredictable sport imaginable. Waves would overlap in chaotic patterns, one tide slamming against another, so that entire coasts might be famous for their bewildering surf. Perhaps whole cultures would rise around these watery games, with festivals devoted to riding the strange doubled tides. But modern science would do more than track or play. It would ask questions that echo through every observatory dome. Would Earth's axial tilt have been steadier or wilder under their combined pull? Would the climate be calmer or more volatile, driven by rhythms colliding in ways we still cannot simulate? Even today, computers would churn endlessly, trying to predict the next alignment of twin moons, the next dramatic tug on oceans, the next subtle shift of the Earth's spin. Now picture how art and imagination would flourish under the gaze of twin moons. Painters would spend lifetimes trying to capture the balance of two silvery globes glowing above a darkened horizon. Poets would weave verses of longing, comparing love to one moon chasing the other, never quite touching, always suspended in the same eternal sky. Even children would grow up with lullabies not about the man in the moon, but about two siblings sharing the night. Science fiction, too, would take a different path. Imagine novels written not about rockets to a single target, but about the intrigue of colonies divided between two moons. One world might be seen as more prosperous, another as more mysterious. Entire storylines would spin from the politics of twin lunar nations, mirrors of human rivalries brought into orbit. And yet there would always be the practical side. Space agencies would spend decades calculating safe launch windows, wary of gravitational slingshots pulling rockets off course. Satellites would trace more complicated paths, sometimes bent or destabilized by competing pulls. GPS systems might be harder to maintain, their precision forever tuned against two competing bodies in the sky. Think for a moment about how nights would feel beneath them. When both moons were full, the Earth would be bathed in double brilliance, shadows sharp, night turned nearly to day. Farmers might sow by this doubled glow, entire harvest festivals marked by the light of two faces watching from above. And when both waned together, the darkness would feel deeper than anything we know today, a true void without their familiar presence. Scientists might still wonder whether the human mind itself would have evolved differently under that sky. Would our circadian rhythms be more flexible, tuned to cycles beyond one? Would our myths of duality, light and dark, life and death, love and loss, be even stronger, etched into us by two nightly guides? And so, as you drift with this thought, imagine yourself lying on a hillside, watching both moons climb slowly above the horizon. Their pale light spreads across fields, across oceans, across every mountain and city. Two companions, silent but constant, reminders of how different life might have been and how infinite the possibilities of worlds can feel. Now, let's follow the thread of science into the future and imagine how humanity might adapt to two moons not just with wonder, but with exploration. We've dreamed of visiting our single moon for centuries, and when we finally did, it reshaped our sense of possibility. But with two, the horizon would have been doubled from the start. Picture the earliest astronomers carving records into stone. They would not only trace the phases of one moon, but the complex dance of two. Calendars would stretch across multiple layers, with festivals not tied to a single cycle, but to the rare alignments when both moons reached fullness together. Imagine the awe of such nights, entire civilizations marking them as sacred, gathering under skies so bright they glowed silver. And when the age of exploration began, telescopes scanning upward would have split their attention. One moon might appear smoother, another pocked with deeper scars. Debates would rage over which should be visited first. Philosophers might even argue that one was meant for science and the other for spirit, dividing human imagination along lines of stone and orbit. By the time rockets rose into the sky, humanity's ambition would have stretched toward both targets. Imagine the rivalry of two space races, one nation planting a flag on one moon, another determined to claim the second. In this alternate timeline, the Cold War might not have ended with one small step, but with two great claims. And what of the sciences that followed? Astronomers would note how each moon pulled differently on tides, geologists would map their craters, and biologists would speculate on the possibility of unique resources buried within their rock. Perhaps one moon would hold richer deposits of ice, its craters shadowed and cold, promising water for future colonies. Think about the human settlements that might rise there. Domes glinting under pale light, solar panels stretched across dusty plains, astronauts building small outposts that grow into cities. Each moon would develop its own culture, its own sense of identity, shaped by the view of Earth hanging in a slightly different sky. Imagine the pride of saying, "I was born on the second moon," as though that birthplace itself set you apart. And through it all, Earth would look upward, not just at a single beacon of exploration, but at two shining symbols of human reach. Our sense of possibility would double, our curiosity stretched wider, our imagination forever expanded. Now imagine the daily rhythm of life back on Earth. Astronauts would beam transmissions not from one lunar surface, but from two, their voices drifting across radio waves like lullabies from the sky. Children would go to sleep hearing stories not just of the moon landing, but of the landings, or plural, each with its own triumphs, its own moments of drama. The very language of exploration would be richer, shaped by the presence of two worlds so close yet so distinct. Think of the possibilities for science. One moon could be dedicated to astronomy, covered with telescopes staring outward, free from the blur of Earth's atmosphere. The other might host experiments in low gravity, laboratories where plants grow strange and new, where materials behave in ways unseen on Earth. In this alternate history, the line between science fiction and daily reality would blur, and humanity's laboratory would stretch not only across continents, but across orbits. And what of the emotional bond? Already, our single moon has inspired poets, dreamers, lovers gazing upward at the same glow. With two moons, imagine the verses. One might be called the Guardian, steady and constant, the other the Wanderer, shifting with more dramatic patterns. Myths would multiply. Some cultures might choose one moon as their symbol, others the second, weaving identity into stone and light. There would also be debates. Who owns the moons? Should they belong to all humanity, or only to those who first set foot there? Questions of sovereignty and stewardship would stir. And yet, alongside those debates would be a quieter truth. The moons belong first to the cosmos, and to the patient dance of gravity that placed them there. Imagine now the future, centuries beyond. Not just colonies, but entire societies rising on both moons, their cultures evolving under twin skies. Trade routes stretching from Earth to Moon A and Moon B. Children growing up in domes of glass, knowing the pull of low gravity as the only way to walk. Festivals celebrated not under Earth's blue sky, but beneath the pale shadows of their adopted worlds. And through it all, humanity would glance back at its home, the planet glowing blue and green, fragile and whole. The two moons would not just be destinations. They would be mirrors, reminding us that we are small, yet capable of reaching outward. They would anchor us to the skies, while also urging us forward, beyond Earth, into the infinite. Picture yourself once more beneath a night sky, but now not as a dreamer imagining, but as a future traveller returning home. You stand on Earth, looking up at not one glowing lantern, but two. Each carries its own history, its own scars, its own secrets. And the way they shape your world is more than myth, more than beauty, it is survival. With two moons, the Earth itself would change in ways you would feel every day. The tides would rise higher, pulled by not one but two bodies. Coastal landscapes would be transformed, with vast estuaries and tidal plains stretching across continents. In some places, water would reach farther inland, feeding ecosystems with nutrients carried from the sea. In others, tides would recede so far that miles of shoreline would be revealed, only to vanish again hours later. Imagine walking along such a coast, the sand still wet under your feet, knowing the ocean will return with a power doubled by the pull of two moons. The climate too would bear their influence. The tilt of Earth's axis, already stabilized by our single moon, would be even more firmly anchored. Seasons might be gentler, less extreme, the cycle of ice ages slowed. Perhaps life on Earth would have found an easier rhythm, the swings between cold and heat softened. But stability can be deceptive. Stronger tides would mean more mixing of the oceans, stirring nutrients to the surface, feeding plankton blooms. Those blooms would feed fish, and fish would feed the great predators of the sea. In this version of Earth, perhaps the oceans would have been even more fertile, even more full of life. And what of us, humans? We are storytellers by nature. Two moons would not only shape the tides and the seasons, but the stories we tell ourselves. Think of ancient shepherds counting not one light but two above their flocks. Think of sailors steering their ships by the pattern of moons, watching carefully as their light overlapped, casting silver paths across the waves. Myths would diverge, cultures would split into those who favoured one moon and those who favoured the other. Wars might even be fought under their shadows, with banners raised to honour different guardians in the sky. Yet alongside conflict, there would be awe. Imagine festivals where both moons appear full on the same night, their combined glow turning darkness into day. Imagine lovers promising themselves not under one pale witness but two, their vows doubled by celestial light. Imagine yourself looking up, realizing that every human, every creature, every plant shares those moons with you, that they are not only in the sky, but in your rhythm, in your tides, in your very breath. Now let your mind wander into the possibilities that two moons might create for science and discovery. Astronomers would have mapped their motions with care, their orbits weaving delicate patterns across the sky. Calculations of eclipses would be more complex, yet more frequent. Sometimes one moon would pass before the other, their shadows layered in a cosmic dance. Entire generations would wait for these rare alignments, when night became a stage for two giants to embrace. And imagine the art inspired by such a sky. Poets would write of the twin eyes of night. Painters would capture landscapes washed not in silver, but in twin streams of light, one pale, one perhaps tinged with faint colour. Music would be written to mark the rhythm of double tides, lullabies sung to children about the sisters of the heavens. Even our calendars might be different, months tied not only to the waxing and waning of one moon, but to the interplay of two. Of course, questions would remain. Would the two moons always be allies in the sky? Or would their gravities tug at one another, shifting their paths, pulling Earth itself into instability? Scientists today still wonder how even a single moon so profoundly shaped our planet's story. With two, the possibilities multiply. More stable seasons perhaps, but maybe also more earthquakes, more restless seas, more surprises hidden in the balance of forces. And yet, despite the uncertainties, one truth is certain: life would adapt. It always has. Creatures of the sea would learn to ride the stronger tides. Plants along the coast would root themselves in shifting sands. Humans would shape their settlements around the rhythm of double moons, building cities farther inland, carving myths into stone, telling stories that would last for millennia. So you stand now in imagination, barefoot on a beach lit by two moons. Their light falls on the waves, on your face, on the world behind you and the future ahead. You breathe slowly, in rhythm with the tides they pull, in rhythm with the turning of the earth itself. And in that moment you realize the story of two moons is not just about what might have been. It is about the endless resilience of life, the endless creativity of imagination, and the endless wonder of looking up at the sky, knowing you are part of something vast. The night stretches on, and you continue to walk through this imagined earth beneath two moons. Their light is steady, yet your thoughts turn now to the deeper consequences such a sky might bring for life itself. You know already that tides sculpt the rhythm of the oceans, and oceans in turn sculpt the rhythm of life. But with 2 moons, those tides would swell higher, fall lower, and carve coastlines with more intensity. Picture the earliest life forms billions of years ago. Scientists believe that shallow tidal pools may have been the first laboratories of life, places where water rose and fell, concentrating molecules until they linked into something more. If those pools were pulled by not 1 tide but 2, their cycles might have been sharper, more frequent, stirring chemistry with a stronger hand. Would life have sparked sooner? Or differently? These questions drift unanswered, and perhaps always will. Now imagine evolution unfolding under such skies. Creatures of the shore would have adapted to tides that reached farther inland, forcing them to move often, to burrow deeper, to swim stronger. Some might have become sturdier, others more flexible. Migration patterns would shift, reproduction cycles might align with the double lunar calendar. Entire ecosystems could pulse to the rhythm of 2 moons, as if the planet itself were drumming twice as loudly. On land, nocturnal creatures would gaze at brighter skies. Prey would have fewer shadows in which to hide. Predators, too, would adapt, sharpening their senses, learning to strike with precision under twin beams of light. Birds might learn to navigate by not 1 beacon but 2, weaving their flight paths by a doubled map across the heavens. And humans, what of us? Our ancestors once painted the single moon on cave walls, carved it into stone calendars, and wove it into myths of gods and goddesses. With 2, our stories would multiply. Perhaps 1 moon would be seen as gentle, nurturing, while the other fierce, unpredictable. Lovers might promise devotion under the gaze of both, as if watched over by 2 eternal witnesses. Farmers would measure planting seasons not only by the phases of 1 moon but by the interplay of 2, a rhythm as complex as a duet. Even our dreams might be different. Imagine sleeping beneath windows filled not by 1 silver disk but 2. Their light would blend, painting landscapes with layered shadows, your nights more luminous, your thoughts more filled with wonder. The subconscious itself might be shaped by their presence, weaving twin moons into symbols of balance, duality, and endless cycles. But the moons would not always remain in perfect harmony. Their orbits might drift, their pulls might clash, and the earth beneath would feel their tug of war. Imagine storms born not only from winds and currents, but from the overlapping tides of 2 celestial bodies. Waves higher than any we have known could crash against the coasts, reshaping continents with each passing age. Volcanoes, too, might answer their call. For the same tidal forces that move water also move stone, pulling gently on the molten rock beneath Earth's crust. With 2 moons above, those forces would double, stirring magma chambers, perhaps coaxing eruptions more often. Entire mountain ranges could rise differently, their birth not only from tectonics but from lunar persuasion. You might ask, would Earth itself survive such strain? Scientists debate this. Some argue the system would collapse quickly, with 1 moon ejected into space or drawn down to shatter against the planet. Others imagine stability, a delicate dance lasting billions of years, the 2 moons locked in a partnership of gravity. The truth remains a question mark, hanging in the sky like the moons themselves. But let us imagine that stability holds. Then the story of life would be written in bolder strokes. Perhaps intelligence would rise sooner, guided by the richer cycles of light and shadow, tide and storm. Perhaps cultures would evolve with mathematics tuned to lunar patterns, calendars woven from double rhythms, art filled with twin symbols. Our entire imagination might grow differently, shaped by what we see in the heavens. Think of our sciences. Astronomy would begin not with 1 obvious question, but 2. Why are there 2 moons, and how do they move together? Philosophy might grow with deeper themes of duality, of pairs, of balance and conflict. Even language might change, our words filled with metaphors of 2s, our myths painted with the drama of celestial siblings. And yet, in your quiet walk through this imagined landscape, you realize something. Whether 1 moon or 2, whether tides gentle or fierce, the heart of Earth's story is the same. Life bends to its rhythms. Life adapts, survives, invents. The moons may shape the stage, but it is life that plays the song. So tonight, as you rest, let yourself picture those two moons hanging above your window. Imagine their light overlapping, painting your room in twin beams. Imagine the tides they stir, the creatures they inspire, the dreams they shape. And know that even if we have only one, the wonder it brings is endless, and the story it has written is already miraculous. The two moons shine above your imagined Earth, but now let us wander deeper into the human side of this vision. Imagine ancient civilizations, long before telescopes or modern science, gazing upward at not one glowing orb but two. How would myths be written? How would religions take shape under double moons? Picture a tribe gathering around a fire telling stories of twin sisters who guard the night sky. One gentle, pale, nurturing. The other fierce, shadowed, quick to vanish and reappear. Their phases would overlap and diverge, creating a theatre of shifting lights. Eclipses would happen more often, one moon slipping behind the other, creating eerie alignments that would astonish early humans. Calendars would be more complex. Instead of months based on a single cycle, timekeepers might follow interlaced rhythms, measuring when the moons rise together, when they part, when their shadows cross. The idea of duality, light and dark, life and death, order and chaos, would be carved deeper into culture. And think of art. Petroglyphs etched into stone might show twin circles hovering above mountains. Ancient temples could be aligned not to one lunar path but to the crossing points of two. Poets would write of lovers separated like moons on opposite sides of the sky, always chasing, never touching. Entire traditions could rise around these nightly performances. Now imagine travel and exploration. Navigators would look not just to stars but to the dual moons for guidance. A ship's course could be tracked by the angle between them, their positions serving as markers across dark seas. The very way we charted the oceans might have been different, more precise, shaped by two celestial compasses. But with two moons, nights might never be truly dark. Even when one was new, the other could be bright, casting shadows across valleys and mountains. Predators might find easier hunting, prey fewer hiding places. Did the path of evolution itself change in our imagined timeline? Would humans have sharper eyes, stronger instincts, built for nights that were never completely black? These questions open like doorways. Each step you take through them carries you further into speculation, into possibilities that stretch beyond what we can measure. Yet they are not idle dreams. They are reminders that our view of the sky has always been a mirror for how we see ourselves. Two moons above would have meant two reflections of humanity below, cultures split and joined by their light. Now, as you stand beneath this double sky, let your thoughts drift into the rhythms of daily life under two moons. Farmers might measure their planting and harvest by not just the waxing and waning of one cycle, but by the dance of two. Imagine the fields glowing silver when both moons are full together, crops bathed in light so bright you could almost read a book at midnight. Festivals, too, would change. Perhaps entire celebrations would be held on nights when both moons rose side by side, twin lanterns above humanity. Songs would be sung, fires lit, dances performed, each echoing the movements in the heavens. A culture's identity might tie itself to one moon more than the other, one seen as a guardian of tides, the other as a keeper of dreams. And think of science. Astronomers from Babylon to Greece to China would have recorded their paths, charting patterns with painstaking care. The calculations would be complex, predictions harder, but in that challenge human intellect might have sharpened earlier, driving mathematics forward with urgency. Could the presence of two moons have accelerated our understanding of gravity, of motion, of cycles? It's tempting to think so. There is also the emotional weight. You know the quiet comfort of seeing a single moon, rising above a horizon, steady and constant. But picture the awe, and perhaps unease, of seeing two. One low and golden, another high and pale. Some nights they drift apart as if quarrelling siblings. Other nights they approach one another, glowing close, almost touching. Would lovers swear their vows by both moons, promising devotion as eternal as the twin lights? Or would warriors march to battle beneath them, claiming divine strength from dual guardians? The double moons could be a symbol of harmony, or of tension, depending on how each culture chose to see them. And yet, even in this imagined world, one truth remains. Humanity adapts. We write stories around what we see, and in seeing two moons we would not have been less human, but perhaps more imaginative. The sky would not only guide our calendars and our crops, it would shape our myths, our songs, our sense of who we are. So, as you lie here in the stillness of your own night, with just one moon outside your window, let yourself picture its silent twin, glowing beside it. Two mirrors in the sky, watching over you. Two lanterns reminding you that even in imagination, the world can be richer, stranger, and more beautiful than it seems. Imagine the world centuries after humanity has lived beneath two moons. Civilizations have risen and fallen, each leaving behind stories carved in stone, written in ink, whispered in song. Two moons become more than celestial bodies. They're woven into the identity of Earth itself, a constant presence in every sky watched by every generation. Think of how navigation would evolve. Mariners of the ancient world steered by stars, by winds, by the light of the single moon we know. But with two, sailors might chart courses guided by their shifting alignment. Imagine Polynesian navigators crossing vast oceans, using not just constellations, but the dance of the twin moons above the horizon. A double map in the heavens, marking pathways across water as old as the Earth itself. Architecture too would change. Imagine temples aligned not to the rising sun alone, but to the nights when both moons hung side by side. Great arches might be built to frame their conjunction, stone doorways capturing the moment when their paths crossed. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, structures that in our world align with stars or solstices, would in that world find alignment in the cycles of two moons. And think of art. Painters would dip their brushes not only in blues and silvers, but in the twin reflections of light across rivers and seas. Poets would write of longing not for the moon, but for moons. Lovers would not ask to be taken to the moon, but to the two moons, imagining eternity beneath their twin glow. Even science fiction might feel different. For us, alien skies are imagined strange because of multiple moons. But if Earth itself had two, our visions of the extraordinary would have to reach further. Perhaps instead of dreaming of twin moons, we would dream of planets with 5 or 6 or rings of shimmering ice like Saturn. Our imagination would stretch differently, shaped by what we had always known. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how would you feel walking outside at night and seeing not one, but two moons glowing above you? Would you feel safer, watched over by more light? Or smaller, humbled by the grandeur of the cosmos pressing closer? This is where the question leads, always circling back to us. The moons may rise, the stars may shine, the planets may drift, but what matters is how humanity responds, how you respond to the vastness overhead. Two moons would not change that instinct to wonder. They would only give us more to wonder at. And now, as the story of two moons drifts toward its close, you can let yourself feel the slow rhythm of this thought. The Earth has always been a stage for wonder. With one moon, it has carried the tides, the seasons, the gentle balance that allowed life to flourish. With two, that balance would shift, perhaps violently at times, but always settling again into a new harmony. That is the lesson of the cosmos. Chaos and order walk hand in hand, shaping the worlds we live upon. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean, waves rolling against your feet. Above you, two moons rise together, their light scattering silver across the surface of the water. The tides are stronger, the waves louder, the pull more insistent. But still there is beauty in the motion. The ocean does not complain. It simply moves, again and again, guided by the sky. Perhaps this is what we can take from the thought experiment. Not just curiosity about physics and orbits, but a reflection of resilience. Life adapts. Earth adapts. Whether with one moon, two, or none, the planet would continue to turn. And you, fragile and strong at once, are part of that turning. Breathe deeply now. You have travelled through science and speculation, through tides and myths, through the delicate balance of gravity and imagination. The moons have risen and set in your mind, and now they drift into dream. Thank you for spending this evening with Moontide Stories. Sleep well, rest deeply, and may tomorrow greet you with peace. Good night.